All right, who's this guy? No, not me. Who's this guy? This is a man of distinction. This is a consequential American. Potter Stewart, Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1958 to 1981. And in the 1960s, Justice Stewart and the rest of the court were struggling with some First Amendment cases in the context of obscenity and legislation that attempted to outlaw what people in some parts of the society considered inexcusably filthy films. But Justice Stewart stood up for the First Amendment and he said, all obscenity should be protected except for hardcore pornography. And then he struggled with that and he said, I have a very hard time defining what hardcore pornography is, but I know it when I see it. And this led to the construction of a movie theater in the Supreme Court. It's a true story. So future films that were being considered were viewed, and as I recall, when we learned about this history in law school, the jokes pretty much wrote themselves. But so you might ask, well, what has this got to do with organic agriculture? And what does this have to do with the present, very real, existential threats to humanity in the form of the great extinction and climate crises catastrophes that we're currently dealing with? I would say everything and nothing. And let's start with nothing. Organic agriculture, unlike what Justice Stewart was struggling with, is a defined term. It's a defined legal term. And it's unlike the words natural, all natural, sustainable, and of course now regenerative. Those are terms that mean whatever anybody wants them to mean. They know them when they see them, but that's different people viewing them. So they have no actual legal meaning. The word organic does, as most of you know. You can't use it, you can't put it on a label unless you comply with a very extensive series of laws. And more on that later. So my wife and I farm organic blueberries in Central Florida, and we are one of the real organic pilot farms. We do the best we can farming truly organically. We always complied with the law. This is it's a medium-sized farm, and it's not small scale. We have to wholesale, but we do nothing more than nothing more and nothing less than steward our soil. That's our primary objective, day in and day out. And we have cover crops that we plant. Sometimes we allow nature to provide her own cover crops. They seem to grow in a natural progression from volunteer, pioneer, all the way through subtle needs that the soil has. And we have invented and fabricated a bunch of mowers that mulch up this green manure, put it up on the beds where it decomposes and becomes a large part of our fertility more and more every year. And also provides a thatch, which helps with our weed control. And that's the brown material you see under the decomposing and also providing a significant mulch. And I wanted to mention wildflowers. These are natural, native. We cultivated native wildflowers actually as banker plants initially. And that allowed us to draw thrips away from our fields, quite effective. But also, of course, we wanted to support our natural pollinators. That's a honeybee. I couldn't get any of the others to hold still for a photograph like that, but we do have a number of other pollinators, from butterflies to wasps to a native Florida blueberry bee. And they're all there along with everything else that we can encourage to live on our farm. We take very seriously our stewardship commitment to the entire non-crop parts of the farm. My wife's a wildlife biologist, excuse me. And aside from the dog photobombing, this is part of our detailed management plan to care for our woods and also our wetlands and everything that that continues to live there. It's extraordinary how much life we have in our blueberry fields. Yeah, most of it I can't identify. I'm not sure what all of it's doing there, but altogether it seems to be doing very well. These are a little frightening to me, but those are mockingbirds that live on the farm. It's a very productive system, and I'm proud to say that we have always been well above average for conventional blueberry production in our yields, and I don't think there's any question our quality has been higher than virtually any I've found. These are some of the people who work on our family scale farm, meaning that it's not tiny, it's not large, it's a farm that can support a few families, and including ours, and I certainly hope to continue to work with excuse me, these people who I've come to love. And I want to show you another way of farming according to the USDA, also organic. This is a farm of identical size, also in Central Florida. And you'll see it's a very different farming system. It consists of extraordinary amounts of plastic. And to prepare these farms, they level, compact the soil and cover it in plastic, which basically makes it unsuitable for farming. But it makes an excellent table on which to put plastic pots. And in those plastic pots goes an inert growth media. And into that inert growth media is a consistent liquid feed, which is how the plant survives. If you shut off that IV, which is, excuse me, if you shut off that IV, the plant won't last any time at all, maybe a few days. There is no soil in that pot. And I say this with confidence because I have used this growing system to experiment with it and understand it. I've grown plants in pots. Very, very quickly they become root bound. There's nothing else in there. They have no water retention capacity. They have no nutrient retention capacity. And there's no biological activity to speak of. If it's there, it's inadvertent. And when they become root bound, they have to continually be fed. And then what even people in the industry keep very quiet is that, by the way, there's no industrial espionage here. These photographs are all still available online. This company is proud of this activity, this enormous plastic sandwich that they've created, but they won't disclose that all of this plastic, virtually all of this plastic, maybe not the hoop houses, but certainly the ground cover and the pots, they go into the dumpster after these plants have timed out, after they've become root bound, which is only 4 years, 4 to 5 years. It goes in the dumpster. Can't be recycled generally, almost never is polypropylene. And that's an organic farming system. And it's not just an organic farming system according to the USDA. It's perfectly acceptable, and it's now become the predominant system for growing organic blueberries in Florida. And if you retain anything from what I have to say today, I want it to be this: blueberries are a canary in the coal mine. There are lots of dead canaries down there. Tomatoes, as Dave will tell you, it's very hard to find an organic tomato in this country now that's not grown hydroponically. Peppers, cucumbers, greens, more every day. So this is not something that we're looking at as a potential future problem. It's overtaking us. This is a very hostile corporate takeover. So you may ask, well, where's all of the USDA integrity on this? And I would argue there isn't any. You may look at the website and see the word integrity over and over, but in my mind, integrity is the alignment of belief and what you say and what you do. It's meaning what you say, saying what you mean, walking the talk. In an institutional sense, for a government entity, what they believe is what the law is. That's what they believe. And what they say would be what you find on their websites and their other outreach, and what they do is how they enforce that law. So if we look at this behavior, how these laws are being enforced, you'll find that the enforcement has no alignment at all with what the law is. So I'd like to show you 3 specific ways that these hydro container systems, and they are hydroponic because they continually have to be fed this liquid feed. These hydro container systems they're virtually all, not like the first pictures, this is another one of these farms, but they all have the same characteristic of this ground cover, this plastic everywhere. These are large farms. This one's in Florida. And now the new technology is these grow bags, so they're not pots. They are plastic bags, and they arrive from India and Sri Lanka as these bricks that you see in the lower right corner there. That brick is compressed to 1/5 the size of the coir for transportation. It is an inert substrate. It's just processed, washed coconut husks. And then when they put it out in the field, it's hydrated, and then it grows up to that size, and the blueberry plants put in there and the sides of the bag are pulled back up. So one way in which this is illegal, contrary to the law, is that the law requires improvement of soil and water quality, woodlands, wetlands, and wildlife. So maybe we walk through those. Soil. So that's the soil on a real organic blueberry farm. I don't have any soil to show you from this system. It's not soil. It's coconut coir. It's in a brick. When the rain falls on a farm like mine, it first hits the plant and then the ground, and it participates in that enormous, incredibly complex, not even barely understood, incomprehensibly complex biological system that's operating there. And then through that interaction of the water and the sunlight and the soil, it's transformed. Ultimately, that water goes through 100 feet of a sand filter, basically where I live, until it hits the static water table, and it's very clean when it gets down there. The water that falls on this farm does a few things, in my view. One of them is it rushes off with enormous potential for erosion. It rains very hard in Florida, and I don't know where that water goes. Probably goes to that little lake that was at the bottom of that hill. But the water goes through the plastic and without a doubt carries leachates from the plastic, and that goes into the ground along with whatever else came through the pot and dripped through the pot. And basically the soil is being treated as a septic tank. Woodlands, I don't know, I don't have anything to show you there. Wetlands, again, maybe the pond at the bottom of the hill would receive a lot of this runoff. Certainly a lot of erosion. And wildlife. This is the kind of thing I guess we hope to see and we get to see where we farm. I don't know what to show you is for wildlife on that plastic farm. Maybe some of these are. So there's a second way that you can find pretty quickly with where the law is being broken, and that's the 3-year transition requirement. And organic law requires transition. If you're working on soil that's been used conventionally, you need to go 3 years before it can be used organically. When these container systems came out, that was not the rule. The rule became, well, it's not growing in the soil, so there needs to be no transition period. It's just growing in that pot. And that was the policy of the USDA for years, until some people at the Real Organic Project objected to it and made it a little bit more public. And then they exchanged letters, certifiers and the USDA, sort of rogue certifiers in my mind. But they said, you know, we've been doing this all along and there hasn't been any objection to it. So let's clear this up. If it's less than 6 inches off the ground, perhaps we should require a transition period. That was the question the certifier asked. And the response from the USDA was, well, if it's grown on the land, then it needs a transition period. They never defined on the land. They didn't define what altitude would make it no longer on the land, and they continue to refuse to do that. And I think that's actually quite understandable when you look at these systems, this one that I showed you before, and look a little closer. Look underneath that grow bag, that little plastic pedestal. So that's 6 inches tall. So I think there's every reason to believe that the policy still is that you can treat this land on Monday with glyphosate, with dicamba, with 2,4-D, with paraquat, whatever you can think of, and harsh chemical agriculture. On Tuesday, you can lay out the plastic. On Wednesday, you can put your 6-inch pedestal in your grow bag there, plant the plants on Thursday. On Friday, you have an instant, organic, disposable plastic farm. And certifiers have attempted to get this clarified by the director of the National Organic Program, and she refuses to do it. And I want to give you one more. This one's my favorite. This is another example of how the current policies and implementation of the National Organic Program violates their own laws. In the regulations that are in place that the USDA promulgated, there's a prohibition on using plastic mulches. And they give you an exception. And the exception is you can use plastic mulches provided that they are removed from the field at the end of the growing or harvest season. So that's an exception. They said, you can do this, and there's good reasons to do it actually on annual crops. And you can improve the soil fertility, you can improve the bioactivity, but on a perennial crop, no. So they put in this word provided. You'll notice it's in italics. And when people write laws, they have no way to emphasize words other than italics. You cannot put them in bold, you can't capitalize them, you can't underline them, you can't put an emoji there, you can't put an exclamation point. None of that's permissible. All you can do is put it in italics. So here's the strongest form of emphasis that they can put in the regulation, that this is an exception. You can't do it if you don't take it out at the end of the growing or harvest season. So you have to wonder, well, how in the world are they allowing these, these guys with those big plastic farms, they're not taking those out every year. So this is being allowed because the Department of Agriculture is defining the growing season as the lifetime of the perennial plant. And that's laughable, isn't it? Does any farmer think that the growing season is anything beyond a year or a portion of a year? And to make it worse, and even more blatant, there's another law, and this is a higher order law. This is a statute. This means it was not passed by the USDA. This was passed by Congress. And so this is found in 7 USC 6508, section 6508. And this says, in very similar language, it says, for a farm to be certified under this chapter, the producers on such farm shall not use plastic mulches unless such mulches are removed at the end of each growing or harvest season. So when Congress makes a law like the OFPA, and they say, here's what we want. We want an organic program. They basically deputize the agency, the USDA in this case, and they say, pass all the laws that are required in order to implement this. And the USDA has several years to do that. But on occasion, the statutes will include language that they don't want messed with. And this is an example of that. It would literally take an act of Congress to change this wording. So how do we square this? How do we square the USDA breaking its own laws? And I think maybe this graph will give us a little bit of an answer. And I think Alan gave us a lot of the answer this morning. Alan Lewis did this morning. This is a graph of production in Florida of blueberries and in Mexico. And you can see that it's just being dwarfed. And the reason for that is these growing systems in Mexico are all of what you saw in Alan's slides. They're all of these plastic, disposable, hydro container farms, organic. So this is not just an addition to organic food in our country. And by the way, as Dave said, nowhere else in the world is hydroponic allowed to be considered organic, just in the United States. So this is not just a complement to real soil-grown organic, it's a replacement. Real soil is being eliminated in organics in favor of a replacement. We will have more of the replacement, no doubt, but we won't have what it eliminated. This is an example of one of these farms in a different region of Mexico than Alan showed you this morning. These are enormous facilities. The wage scale, by the way, is about $1 an hour. And these are USDA certified organic blueberries. So what do we end up with? We end up with real organic, and its conviction and concentration and belief in improving soil. And we have conventional agriculture, which is relegating soil to some extent and adding chemical inputs to it. And then we have the USDA's version of organic, which is eliminating soil and adding plastics. It's not cheerful stuff, I apologize. I could have also titled my talk, It's Worse Than You Think. But I want to leave you with this. Blueberries in the coal mine, I hope that sticks with you. And then I want to tell you that, in my opinion, we're now seeing the USDA program. USDA Organic has just become a government-sponsored fraud. And it's a fraud on farmers. It's a fraud on farmers like me who have followed the law, obeyed the law. And it's a fraud for sure on consumers. I don't think there's very many people out there who would feel like they were treated well if they realized that the premium they pay for organic food is going to support and proliferate farming practices like this. And then it's a fraud on the planet. We're now seeing the USDA go into the public treasury and spend enormous amounts of money to support climate smart agriculture when they are simultaneously eliminating climate smart agriculture and replacing it with something that is undeniably climate hostile. And I guess I have one last question, which is who's going to clean up this mess? And it's not going to be the USDA. It's going to be, unfortunately, it's going to be you. And it's going to be the people with the talent, like a Paul Hawken, who can communicate so incredibly well. It'll be people with the resources, people with the conviction, like the people who put on this program today, people who came from all over the world to participate in it, people who are connected to all of you electronically. That's who has the potential to change this. And I sure think it's worth it. I hope everybody who has got resources will pitch them in. If you have time, if you have talent, if you have money, I hope you will support these changes that have to happen. And we need to do it because what this planet has given us, all of us, this indescribably beautiful planet has given us everything. Let's not squander it. Thank you. On we go.